Hey everybody, it's Josh with the Lead Ministry Podcast. Now, hey, listen, before we jump into the podcast, I want to let you know of some exciting news. I have a brand new course that I'm getting ready to release entitled Lead Conflict. That's right, Lead Conflict. Listen, if you have been in ministry for any length of time, you understand that conflict is a part of our role. We want to teach you how to minimize the frequency and likelihood of conflict taking place, but we also want to help you strategize how to manage the conflict that does come your way. Now, again, as you would expect, this is a full-length course. Tons of downloads, tons of fantastic strategies. Again, the new Lead Conflict course is coming your way, and we're excited to do this little podcast series that kind of teases out some of the concepts that we're going to be releasing through this brand new course, Lead Conflict. All right, gang, let's jump into the podcast. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Volunteers Lead Ministry Podcast. We're so grateful that you're here. This is a fun thing. This is something that I choose to do. This is something that I like to do. And I got to tell you, I like to do this with my friend and my podcast partner, Bill Van Kirk. So we're grateful that you're here. Hey, we would love it if you would click subscribe. We would love it if you would like the podcast. We would love it if you would make a comment. Like literally, if some of these things are benefiting you, would you help benefit us? Because if you simply make a comment, that lets the algorithm know that other people should be listening to this. So we're grateful that you're here. We are talking in this little micro series about conflict. It's been something that we should have talked about a long time ago. Why? Because it's so prevalent in our society. It's so prevalent amongst us as human beings, and we need to have some skills as it relates to conflict management and conflict resolution. Good to see you again, Mr. Bill.
Yeah, I love podcast day. Podcast day is when we record podcasts together. It is my favorite.
I really like it too. And I like it because I like you. And I think that you truly provide a lot of insight, and you educate me. And I get a lot from hanging out with you, Bill. I really do. So I'm very grateful. Okay. So we are here on the Lead Ministry Podcast. We're in this little series about managing conflict. As we always try to do, we try to put out three big buckets. I come at this from an educator's perspective, and I do believe that if we put out some simple mental scaffolding, that your brain has categories into which we're going to put these things, and then you're going to be far more likely to be able to apply them to your life. We want you to be a better practitioner. So we're going to define conflict over and over and over during the series. We're going to develop an idea or a principle, and then we're going to challenge you and show you some super practical ways to pull this off. So it's define it, it's develop it, and it's do it. So from a definition standpoint, what is the definition of conflict? Conflict is a serious disagreement or argument, typically protracted. Now, this is not a minor disagreement or argument. This is sometimes it can be, in a ministry context, it can be a serious disagreement. By the way that we manage conflict is either going to cause it to be a less serious disagreement, or it's going to cause it to be a more serious disagreement. Our leadership moxie and our leadership prowess and the tools that we have are going to either greatly increase the proclivity for which we're going to have conflict, or it's going to decrease that. I want less conflict. And by the way, as Bill has taught us in a previous podcast, God's desire is unity amongst the body. And therefore, our ability to de-escalate conflict is in keeping with what God wants. That's all we got to say. God wants this. We want to avoid conflict as best we can, but we also want to seek to not just avoid conflict, but we want to create peace. So this great quote from a guy named Don Miller, it says this: any fool can create conflict, but it takes an emotional genius to broker peace. You know what? I want to be an emotional genius. I want to broker peace. And what is a broker? A broker is somebody who's like wheeling and dealing, right? I want to be a wheeler and a dealer in peace, not in strife. So that's what we're heading towards. As we've talked about on the podcast, we're literally looking to have two intelligent ways of operation. Intelligent way number one is we want to reduce the likelihood of conflict. We can do that through good principles, through good practices, through being on time, okay? Through having an agenda for a meeting. That can reduce conflict. Through having like your upcoming event, having it dialed in. If you don't do your job, you're probably going to be more likely to have conflict because things aren't done and people are ticked at you. Do your job, you'll probably have less conflict. However, the idea that the goodness of how you do your work is going to eliminate all conflict is a fool's errand. That is just not going to happen. It's a dream. It's a bad dream because you're going to be caught off guard when conflict does come your way. The second pathway is to intelligently manage the conflict that does come our way. Reduce it as much as you can, but then when it does come your way, we have some strategies and some tools that we're teaching you about. So this strategy today, we just defined it. Now we're going to develop it. This is our second big chunk, our big block. And that block is this. The development is this. Black hat versus white hat leadership. Black hat versus white hat. And I got to tell you, but I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I want to wear the white hat as often as I can. I don't want to be wearing the black hat as a leader. The black hat often brings the bad news. I want to be the white hat good guy. I don't want to wear the black hat the bad guy. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I find it very ironic that today, if you're watching from YouTube,
I'm wearing hat.
I'm wearing the black hat.
I feel like I don't have a white hat, but I have a gray hat. I feel like going and running and grabbing my gray hat. That's so funny. I didn't hear. You are literally wearing a black hat.
Yes.
But here's what I want to say. White hat leadership is preventative leadership. I can do some things that prevent me from wearing the black hat and from being the guy that's bearing the bad news. So the black hat brings the bad news. And guess what? Cat out of the bag one more time. Make a policy and make that policy wear the black hat. This is preventative leadership. Let me explain. Without a signed conduct waiver, I have to wear the black hat and deliver the bad news to a family that this kid who was serving in our ministry as a junior in high school has broken our conduct code and he now is excluded from our ministry. Now, this one, Bill, gotta be honest. Once again, I am speaking from a position of experience. I was young in ministry. I had no conduct policy. And lo and behold, this kid got in humongous trouble. It was in the newspaper. He got kicked off of the football team. He got kicked off of National Honor Society. It was kind of a situation. It was his family was embarrassed. The kid was embarrassed. And then to put some icing on the cake, and by the way, that icing was made with salt and not sugar. This was bitter icing. They had this terrible cake that they were managing as a family, and then I had to bring them in and say, as a result of that which you've done, here's just the icing on the cake. You now have to be excluded from serving in ministry for a season. And that was a blow that they just did not want to hear.
Yeah. Ouch.
And I had to be the bearer of that bad news. And the mom and the dad, the kid was he was destroyed. He was off on the side. He was upset about what had gone on and he was very embarrassed, and I get that. But the mom and the dad, I'm just dreaming now, but I think they had had enough. And they didn't want to have to deal with just yet one more of these things. And I was the guy who was bringing that. And they were like, well, why does it have to be this way? And I was like, oh my word, do I literally need to spell out the egregious things that your son did? I'm bummed that he did those, but we can't have him serve with kids for a season. that's just going to be the way that it is. Everybody on staff agreed. Everybody was supportive, but I lost unnecessarily with that family. I had to wear the black hat. And so moving forward, I was like, I never want to be in that position again. Now, because life is life and kids are kids, moving forward, I had a conduct policy that said, here are the things that would probably preclude you from serving in our ministry. If you do these things, you're probably going to be sidelined for a period of time. Well, lo and behold, kids being kids, I had another one of these incidents, and now the kid was all bummed out and disheveled, and the mom and dad were really hurt. But I got to hand everybody a signed piece of paper that says, hey, Billy, his name wasn't Billy. Hey, Billy, I just want to let you know, man, I am so bummed. We love you, buddy. And this piece of paper, it just kind of spells out what we kind of got to do. So I was, in a sense, off the hook, and the piece of paper bore the bad news. Bill, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think that's, if you have those things set out ahead of time, it just makes it so much easier. We all agreed to the ground rules when you started.
Bingo. That's exactly right. We agreed to the ground rules, and guess what? Without a signed waiver, I have to establish the ground rules and be the bearer of bad news. Which, by the way, can I be honest with you? That we know that James 3:1 pretty clearly says in Scripture, those who are in a leadership position are going to be called to a higher sense of accountability. You are a leader because you're in this position, you're a leader, and that those actions are not in keeping with what we would want as a leader. Therefore, however, the easiest thing for me to do is to have a piece of paper that has been signed that bears that bad news. So it's preemptive leadership. Stick with me real quick. With a signed conduct waiver, I get to wear the white hat, and the waiver wears the black hat, which is now delivering that bad news. That's the angle. That's the answer. That's the thing that I want. And I think that it's just literally so important for us to have our leadership lined up in such a way that it's preventative leadership, Bill.
Yeah. I think there's also a fairness aspect to it, for them and how they experience it. If somebody does something for which you have to wear the black hat for, and you didn't specify it ahead of time, they feel like you're just making a judgment call in the moment. About them. But if you already had the parameters and the guardrails that are necessary for your ministry, and they violated it, then they kind of have to go, well, I knew, I signed, this was laid out for me, this is what it is.
You're exactly right. And I think as I look back, this is very interesting. I'm reflecting on that first initial experience. I think that that's why the parents were so hurt and upset, that they were like, you're making a judgment against our son, and you're coming up with this on the fly. Well, I think in their saner moments, they would have concluded, holy smokes, what my kid did, yeah, he deserves to not be serving in a front-facing way. But because it wasn't laid out, it left some quite a big open space. Well, here's the thing. I want to talk to you as we kind of turn the corner, and I want to talk to you about how we can do this. I think the one that I just explained, the idea of having a conduct policy, that's pretty straightforward. But there's another example that I want to give, and this is practicing preventative leadership. Stick with me. You see, policies or trainings can be your friend. I'm going to say this. Proactively training on, quote, the golden moments saves the day. Now, Bill, of course, you might be like, what are the golden moments? Let me explain. So the golden moments, gold is priceless, isn't it? And the reason it's priceless is because it's so rare. Gold is important because it's rare and because it doesn't really corrupt. It doesn't rust. It's got some unique properties, but its rareness is one of the reasons. So hear me out. In a ministry context, 90% of the time, it's an office job. 10% of the time, the body of Christ is gathered. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I have watched leaders. I'm only saying what I've experienced, and I'm not trying to throw youth pastors under the bus, but I have watched time and time again youth pastors when Sunday morning is upon us and they had 35 to 40 hours all week long to make the photocopies and to make their final preparations and to set up the room. They're doing all of those things. They're scurrying to type out the lesson. They're scurrying to make the printouts. They're going by themselves downstairs to set up the room. When the body is gathered, they are squandering the golden moments to where, if I was their supervisor and I was not, I would say, what were you doing during the 35 hours of your week that you could have maybe set all of those things up so that you could be present when the body is here? Your work, youth pastor, my work, Josh, our work in ministry, I do 35 hours a week in order to be prepared for when the body is gathered. My work isn't the printout. The printout serves an opportunity to help facilitate a human being closer to God.
Right. Absolutely.
So I want to be as present as I can during what I'm calling these golden moments. Okay, so stick with me. So first of all, do you understand the golden moments, that they are few and far between when the body is gathered, and we need to do everything that we can to be as present as we can when the body is together?
Right. We need to set it up so that we can capitalize on the golden moments.
Yes. And Bill, talk to me. You've seen fails in this way, have you not?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you can see it really clearly. Like I've seen it often when somebody's just getting into ministry. Maybe you have an intern or something like that. And you can tell the difference between a seasoned ministry person who's been successful and somebody who's brand new, because they often don't come to those golden moments prepared. And then you watch them like their hair is on fire, running around like crazy. And the beautiful moment that they could have had with this member of the church who could have come over to them and had a critical conversation, and they could have furthered a relationship, whether that relationship ends up in a recruiting opportunity for them to get into serving, whether that means that they're going to come to you and tell you a hard thing and confide in you. All of those are squandered because you missed it and you let the gold slip through your fingers. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I mean, I think if you are in the ministry position right now,
yes,
where your golden moments, you are running around like a crazy person.
Yep.
And you're always going to have some of those weeks, okay? Everyone's going to have some of those weeks.
For sure.
But if that is you every week, where your stress level is at 12 on a 1 to 10 on your during the golden moments, this podcast is for you.
Yes. And so watch carefully. So I set this up, which, by the way, we could have had an episode completely on, quote, the golden moments. But the point of our podcast today is called preemptive leadership. Mm-hmm. So stick with me. So proactively training about the golden moments saves the day. Stick with me. So here's what, and this is kind of small to see, but I'm going to read it out loud for us. Bad leader behavior. So now I'm a children's pastor, and I'm looking at the room full of 12 small group leaders, and kids are now flooding into the room. It is the golden moments. So here's where golden moment fails take place. Number one, leaders are talking to other leaders off in the corner, and they're not talking to kids. That is a golden moments fail. You could be capitalizing on the golden moments with these kids who are in your small group and ask them about the dog that they just got. Is that thing still whining and keeping your family up? And they're like, oh, wow, this leader knows me. Yes, you should be having that conversation, not the conversation with your good friend off in the corner with another adult leader. Okay, so you got adult leaders talking to adult leaders, not talking to kids. That's a golden moment fail. Number 2, not reading their lesson ahead of time, and they're sitting by themselves in absentia from any kids. Kids are flocking around and they are manically reading the lesson because they got it on a Wednesday or a Thursday and they have done nothing with it. And now they're reading it for the first time. They are squandering the golden moments. And me as a children's pastor, I cringe when I see adults talking to adults and not talking to kids. I cringe when I see leaders manically reading the lesson for the first time on a Sunday morning when kids are all around. And I also cringe when I see adult leaders looking at their phones and ignoring kids around them. Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So now I, as a leader, I have 2 choices. I have 3, actually. Number 1, I could ignore bad behavior and not address this and be like, people are people. And guess what? I don't want any conflict. I'm not saying anything. So now I'm choosing avoidance. That's not a good thing. So you got avoidance. Number 2, I could choose to accost them. I could do it as nice as I could, but I'm going to be wearing a big old fat black hat. I'm going to walk up and say, hey, could you 2 leaders find a time to talk with one another at another time? Our main point is to talk to kids right now. Instantaneously, those leaders feel like I just slapped them across the face. Am I right?
Yeah, no matter how you say it, really.
No matter how I say it, I'm wearing a big old fat 10-gallon Texan black hat. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Watch this now. Let's say that somebody is reading the lesson for the first time. Right there, kids are all around him. And I walk up and I say to them, hey, Connie, we really want you, shame. We really want you to make sure we get these to you on a Tuesday or Wednesday so that you don't find yourself in a position to be reading this for the first time right now. There is no way to say that other than a slap across her face and me walk away with a 10-gallon black hat. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
There is no way for me to walk up to a teacher and say, hey, could you get off your phone? Because they know not to do that, but now I'm calling them out. Not a good thing, am I right?
Right.
Okay, so I've established this. I don't want this bad behavior to happen, but I don't want to smash this person by calling out their bad behavior. So what do? Wisdom would have a preemptive training that allows for me to remind them, not rebuke them. Stick with me. So all of a sudden, I do a glorious, non-threatening training that says, hey, here's let me tell you what, see this right here? This is gold. Gold is precious. It's very rare. And in ministry, guess what? Us being with the kids, that's very rare. We get 42 minutes with these kids. And really, during the large group time, they're listening. You're not hanging with them. Really, you get about 17 to 22 minutes with these kids. I want you to be all up on them. Here's a list of questions you can ask. These are the gold moments. Get to know these kids and let them know that you love them. In our meeting, here's this training. Here are 3 ways that are going to really, really royally screw those up. If you are looking at your phone, if you're talking to other adult leaders, and if you're looking at your lesson for the very first time, let's all just agree that those are anti-golden moment things. What do you say, gang? All right. Very good. Very good. Thank you for coming in on a Sunday night for this training. Thank you for watching this video that I put together called Training Without the Meeting about Golden Moments. You go be you. And by the way, each Sunday when a leader walks in the room, we're going to announce, hey, everybody, it's the golden moments. And so then I walk into the room and kids are starting to come in. I'm like, hey, everybody, don't forget, right now, it's golden moments. Got it? Golden moments. And that is a preemptive leader. I've posited some leadership language that allows me to get what I want without walking by and slapping somebody across the head and rebuking them. By doing this preemptive training, about what the golden moments are and how to win at them and how to fail at them. I'm now doing reminding, not rebuking.
I love that. That's a genius approach to this. I would just add this, and maybe you have this coming. I don't know.
Please.
But the other piece of this is not just preemptive. You've trained them. You've done this. You've pumped them up. You're wearing the white hat, not the black hat.
Yes.
But also celebrating those who engage in the golden moments significantly. So the next training you go, hey, I just want to tell you about one of our volunteers that we have here, Julie. Julie capitalizes on the golden moments. Let me tell you how she does it. In celebrating Julie in front of everyone.
That's right.
Because people will gravitate towards what you celebrate.
That's exactly right. I like that. Gravitate towards what you celebrate. I call it, another way to put that, I like yours better. People will move toward the applause.
Yes, that's so true.
They gravitate towards what you celebrate. And so guess what? By preemptively training them, I can remind them, but I can also celebrate when they do it right. Mm-hmm. As opposed to always being on the heels, always being on my heels to correct. So all of a sudden, here's the thing, man. I don't want to have negative experiences. Like all of a sudden, we're talking about how to avoid conflict. Preemptively training about things and giving them best practices, that puts me in a position to wear the white hat and not be a jerk, even though I might be justified, but it's still a jerk thing to tell somebody that you're the loser who is reading your lesson for the first time right now. That's not helpful.
Right. You don't want to be a Pop-A-Mole leader. You know that game that
yes,
you had? Like whack-a-mole. Yeah. Those little things come up and you whack them.
Yes.
That's not what you want to be doing as a leader. You want to get ahead of it.
You want to get ahead of it. And so watch this. One way that you can prevent conflict from ever taking place is by being a proactive and preemptive leadership positor. I'm positing these positive things. I'm putting them into play, and then I'm reminding people about them. And by the way, it takes preemptive leadership. And that sometimes is something that we don't think through. So watch this. Whatever you don't want to see, create a training about it. And all this, you don't need to be a freak about it. And everybody's like, oh, well, they're clearly talking about John. You know what I mean? That's not, right. If John's got his issue, I don't like it when all of a sudden I'm at a job and they make a rule that applies to nobody but John. And I'm like, seriously? Can't you just talk to John? Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about all that garbage. But what I'm saying is that I'm going to do preemptive leadership training that reduces the snap factor. I don't want to snap people. That's bad leadership. That is not good leadership. And it makes somebody feel shame. And shame ultimately can bring about resentment and cause conflict. So we're talking about how to reduce conflict. I think this is a good one. Figure out how to wear that white hat, my friend, not the black hat.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, this is good. Well, gang, we're super grateful that you guys are here. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. I certainly hope that you can take some of these principles. Hey, if you're seeing something that needs addressed, create a training and then be the chief reminding officer. You're not the CEO. You're not the CFO, the chief financial advisor officer. You are the CRO, the chief reminding officer. But you got to throw those things out so that you can be the one who reminds about good practices. Well, grateful that you're here. Thanks so much, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in to today's podcast. I hope that it was valuable to you. Before you close this out, I want to remind you that we have a brand new course entitled Lead Conflict. That's right. As you know, conflict is a good case of the inevitabilities, and we want to help you to successfully navigate and manage conflict in your ministry role. So be on the lookout for this brand new course that is going to be dropping soon, Lead Conflict. And thank you once again for tuning into the podcast.